She thought the hardest part was already behind her. She was wrong. Marcus Chen was standing in her apartment when she got home. Not outside it. Not in the hallway. Inside it, in her living room, sitting in her grandmother's chair like he belonged there, with two men standing at her kitchen entrance and the particular smile of someone who has never once in his life been told no and meant it. Kamari stopped in the doorway. She did not scream. She did not run. She had been raised by a woman who believed that the moment you let fear move your body, you had already lost half the fight. So she stood in the doorway of her own apartment and looked at Marcus Chen and said nothing, because silence, her mother had taught her, was sometimes the most powerful thing a woman owned. "Close the door, Kamari," Chen said pleasantly. "We need to talk." She closed the door. Her phone was in her hand. She had exactly 3 seconds to make a decision. She texted Kaine one word: Violet. The code word they had established 2 weeks ago when she first told him Jan had been watching her building. Violet meant danger, immediate, come now. She slipped the phone into her pocket before Chen's men could see. "If you are here for the story that will demand everything from you, that will take you to the edge, and then further, subscribe right now. Turn on every notification. Because what comes next is the part where everything breaks before it can be rebuilt. And I promise you, it will be worth every second. Now let us begin." "Sit down, Kamari," Chen said. "I'll stand." Chen's smile thinned. "I've been very patient with you. I gave you time. I gave you space to come to your senses. And instead you've been building a case against me with federal agents. Did you think I wouldn't find out?" Her blood went cold. But she kept her face exactly where it was. "I don't know what you're talking about. Don't insult me." He stood up slowly. "I have sources everywhere, including inside the task force that's been circling my operations for months. They told me something interesting yesterday. They told me a forensic accountant has been feeding them information. Financial structures, LLC chains, payment documentation." He walked closer to her. "And when I asked who, they said a name I recognized. Your name." Kamari's mind raced. She had been careful. Every submission through encrypted channels, every meeting off record. But someone inside the task force had leaked. Someone Chen owned. "So here's what's going to happen," Chen continued. "You're going to call your federal contacts right now and tell them you made a mistake. That you misinterpreted the financial records. That you're withdrawing your cooperation." "No," Kamari said. Chen's hand moved so fast she almost didn't see it. He grabbed her wrist hard, yanking her forward. "You don't seem to understand what's at stake. Your cooperation has made my life complicated. I don't like complicated. So you're going to uncomplicate it or—" The door exploded inward. Not opened. Exploded. The lock shattered, the door slamming against the wall with a sound like thunder, and Jean came through first, moving with the fluid violence of someone who had done this so many times it was reflex, and behind him, Kaine. Kamari had seen Kaine in boardrooms. She had seen him at galas, at dinners, in the careful performance of a man building something legitimate. She had never seen this. His face was completely empty. Not controlled empty. And his eyes had gone to someplace that was not this room, not this moment, someplace older and colder and considerably more dangerous. He looked at Chen's hand on her wrist. He looked at her face. "Let her go," Kaine said. His voice was very quiet. Almost nothing. It was the most frightening thing Kamari had ever heard. Chen released her wrist. His two men moved forward, hands going to concealed weapons, but Jean was already between them and Kaine, and something in Jin's posture communicated that the next person who moved wrong was not going to enjoy what followed. "Ryu," Chen said pleasantly, but there was something in his voice now that hadn't been there before. Something that understood it had miscalculated. "This is a private conversation. You're in her home without permission," Kaine said. "You put your hands on her. There is nothing private about what happens next. She's been interfering with my business." "Your business," Kaine said, "is finished. The task force you think you have contained has been building a case for 18 months. The leak you relied on was identified and removed 3 days ago. Every piece of information Kamari submitted is verified, documented, and legally bulletproof. The only question is whether you walk out of this building under your own power, or whether I ensure you don't walk anywhere again." The room went very, very quiet. Kamari watched Kaine's hands. They were relaxed at his sides, completely still. And she understood, with absolute clarity, that the stillness was not calm. It was restraint. It was the active choice not to move, because if he moved, if he let himself move, someone in this room was going to the hospital. Kaine, she said quietly. His eyes moved to her. Just his eyes. The rest of him stayed absolutely motionless. I'm okay, she said. He didn't hurt me. Something shifted in his face. Not softening. Not yet. Just recognition. That she was there, that she was speaking, that her voice was the thing pulling him back from wherever he had gone. Jean, Kaine said, without looking away from her. Escort Mr. Chen and his associates out of the building. If they resist, handle it. Jean moved forward. Chen's men looked at Chen. Chen looked at Kaine. Whatever calculation Chen was running, it came to a conclusion. This isn't finished, Chen said. Yes, Kaine said, still looking at Kamari. It is. Jean walked Chen and his men to the door. They left. The apartment was suddenly very empty and very quiet. Kaine stood in the center of her living room, breathing carefully, his hands still at his sides, and Kamari understood that he was still deciding whether to go after Chen and finish what every instinct in his body was telling him to finish. She crossed to him. She put her hand on his chest, over his heart. She felt it hammering. Kaine, she said. Look at me. He looked at her. Really looked at her, his eyes searching her face for damage, for fear, for anything that would give him permission to do what he wanted to do. I'm okay, she said again. You got here in time. I'm okay. His hand came up slowly and covered hers, pressing it harder against his chest. If I had been 5 minutes later. You weren't. Kamari. His voice fractured slightly on her name. When I got your text, when I saw Violet, he stopped. I need you to understand something. The person I was 3 years ago would have killed him. Not threatened. Killed. For touching you. For being in your home. For making you afraid. I know, she said quietly. I wanted to, he said. I still want to. That hasn't changed. The wanting doesn't go away because I've spent 3 years building something different. But you didn't, she said. You chose differently. That's what matters. He pulled her against him then, hard, one hand in her hair and the other around her waist, holding her with the kind of strength that was not careful or controlled or anything other than desperate. She felt him shaking. I can't, he stopped. Started again. I cannot have someone put their hands on you and not respond. I don't have that in me. I thought I had built that discipline and I don't. I want him gone. I want him unable to come near you ever again. Then let's make that happen, she said into his shoulder. The right way. The way that doesn't destroy everything you've built. He was quiet for a long moment, just holding her, and she held him back and let him have whatever time he needed to come back from the edge. When he finally pulled back, his face was more controlled, but his eyes were still dark. We're moving you out of this apartment, he said. Tonight. You're staying at the penthouse until Chen is in custody. Kaine. That is not negotiable, he said. He knows where you live. He got inside once. I will not give him the opportunity to do it again. She looked at him. At the absolute certainty in his face. At the thing underneath it that was fear, genuinely, probably the first time he had felt it in years. Okay, she said. But not because you told me to. Because it's smart and I agree. Something in his expression eased slightly. Pack what you need. Jean will take you to the penthouse. I have calls to make. What kind of calls? The kind that ensure Marcus Chen has a very bad week. 20 minutes later, she was in Kaine's penthouse with a hastily packed bag and a view of Manhattan that still made her catch her breath every time. Jean had stationed himself outside the door. She had been told, politely but completely, that she was not leaving without escort until further notice. She should have been angry about it. She wasn't. She was sitting on Kaine's couch wearing his shirt because she hadn't packed enough, and it was there, and it smelled like him, and she was drinking tea Jean had made her without being asked. And she was trying very hard not to think about Chen's hand on her wrist and the sound the door had made when Kaine came through it. Her phone buzzed. Kaine. Are you all right? She texted back, yes. Are you? A long pause. Then, I'm working on it. The task force is moving up their timeline. Chen will be arrested within 48 hours. I've ensured they have everything they need. How did you ensure that? I made calls to people who owed me favors and reminded them what those favors were worth. Chen's leak inside the task force has been identified. The case is clean. She absorbed that. Thank you. Don't thank me. This is not altruism. I need him unable to reach you. This is the fastest way to ensure that. She stared at the text for a moment. Then typed, "When are you coming home?" The pause was longer this time. Home. Your penthouse. Where I am. When are you coming here? 2 hours. Maybe 3. There are things I need to handle first. Don't do anything that can't be undone, Kaine. Another long pause. I won't. I promise. But I need to move some pieces before Chen realizes how contained he actually is. Be safe. Always. She set her phone down. She looked out at the city. She thought about the past 8 weeks and how she had gotten from a ballroom to this couch, from a desperate plan to this particular kind of fear that was not for herself, but for the man who had broken down her door because she had texted one word. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. But forensic accountants did not survive by avoiding difficult calls. Hello, Ms. Mensah. This is Special Agent Sarah Vance, FBI. We met 4 weeks ago when you began cooperating with our investigation into Marcus Chen. Kamari sat up straight. Agent Vance. Has something happened? We've moved up the arrest timeline to tomorrow morning. 6 a.m. We'll be executing warrants simultaneously at 4 locations. A pause. I'm calling because Chen knows we're coming. We believe he's going to run. And before he runs, he's going to tie up loose ends. What does that mean? It means you're a loose end, Ms. Mensah. You and your family. We're offering you protective custody until the arrest is complete. How long is protective custody? 72 hours, possibly more. Kamari thought about Jean outside the door. About Kaine making calls to people who owed him favors. About the kind of protection that came with very different methods than federal protocols. I'm already protected, she said. By Ryu Kaine. Yes. Agent Vance was quiet for a moment. Ms. Mensah, I've read Ryu's file. What his father built, what he's been dismantling. I believe his transition is genuine. But the kind of protection he can offer comes with costs that federal protection doesn't. What costs? The cost of owing someone. The cost of what he might have to do to keep you safe. The cost of pulling him back toward methods he's spent 3 years walking away from. She paused. I'm not questioning his intentions. I'm questioning whether being the reason he compromises those intentions is something you want to carry. Kamari was very quiet. Because Agent Vance had just said the thing Kamari had been trying not to think about since Kaine had come through her door with that look on his face. I'll think about it, Kamari said. You have 2 hours. After that, Chen might move and we won't be able to guarantee your safety or your family's. Vance paused. I'll text you the protective custody location. If you decide to come, bring nothing. We'll provide everything you need. The call ended. Kamari sat on the couch in Kaine's shirt looking at her phone. She thought about her father. About Tund and Dami and Khalad. About the fact that Chen knew who they were and where they lived and was, according to Agent Vance, tying up loose ends. She thought about Kaine and the way his hands had shaken when he held her. She thought about what her mother would say. Her mother, who had never once chosen the easy path when the right path was available, even when the right path cost everything. She picked up her phone. She called Kaine. He answered immediately. What's wrong? The FBI just called. They're offering protective custody. For me and my family. Until Chen is arrested tomorrow morning. Silence on his end. And, he said finally. And I think I should take it. The silence was longer this time. Why? His voice was very careful. Because the person you become when you're protecting me is not the person you're trying to be, she said quietly. And I will not be the reason you walk backward, Kaine. I won't do that to you. Kamari. I saw your face tonight. I saw where you went. And I understand it. I do. But if Chen makes another move, if he gets close to me or my family again, you're going to do something you can't take back. And I love you too much to let that happen. The sound he made was not quite a laugh, and not quite anything else. You love me, he said. Yes. And because you love me, you're going to federal protective custody, so I don't have to choose between keeping you safe and staying who I've decided to be. Yes. He was quiet for a very long time. That is, he stopped. That is the most extraordinary thing anyone has ever done for me. It's 72 hours, Kaine. Maybe less. I know. She heard him exhale slowly. But I need you to understand something. I don't want you in protective custody. Every instinct I have is telling me to keep you here where I can see you. Where I know you're safe because I've ensured it personally. I know. But you're right, he said quietly. If Chen moves on you again, I will handle it the way I used to handle things. And that version of handling it ends with me being someone I've worked very hard not to be. A pause. So yes, take the protective custody. Take your family. Let the FBI do what they're equipped to do. And I will stay here and handle what I'm equipped to handle, which is ensuring that when Chen is arrested tomorrow, the case against him is so thoroughly documented he never walks free. Kaine. I love you, he said. I need to say that before you go somewhere I can't reach you for 3 days. I love you. You walked into my life, and you have consistently, without exception, made me want to be better than I was. And this, you choosing protective custody not for yourself, but for who I'm trying to be, that is the proof that you see me. The real version. Not the performance. Her throat tightened. I see you, she said. 72 hours, he said. And then I'm taking you to dinner. Somewhere with no danger and no federal agents and nothing but us. I'm holding you to that. Good, he said. Jean will drive you to the protective custody location. Pack nothing, like they said. Just go. I'll handle your family. Kaine. I will call your brothers. I will explain the situation. I will ensure they're in protective custody within the hour. That is what I can do that doesn't compromise anything. Let me do it. She closed her eyes. Okay. 72 hours, Kamari. 72 hours, she agreed. The protective custody location was a safe house in Queens, nondescript and completely unremarkable, which was the point. Agent Vance met her at the door with 2 other agents and the particular brisk efficiency of someone running an operation on an accelerated timeline. Her father and brothers arrived 30 minutes later, looking confused and worried and, in Tun's case, slightly annoyed. Kamari, what is happening? Her father said the moment he saw her. She told them. All of it. The cooperation with the task force, Chen's escalation, the arrest happening in the morning. She told them plainly, without decoration, because her family had never responded well to anything other than direct truth. When she finished, Tund looked at her for a long moment. You've been building a federal case, he said slowly, while dating a former mafia boss, while helping him transition his organization to legitimacy, while managing Chen's threats. For 2 months. Yes. A bureau, he said. You're either the bravest person I know or the most reckless. Mama would say both, Kamari said. Her father made a sound that might have been a laugh if it hadn't been so exhausted. Your mother would have been proud and terrified in equal measure. She would have told me to handle it and then lectured me for 3 hours about the handling, Kamari said. Yes, her father said quietly. She would have. He looked at her with the particular expression of a parent seeing their child clearly for the first time in years. You did this. You built all of this. The case, the protection, the plan. Not Ryu. You. Ryu helped. Ryu fell in love with you, her father said, which means he was smart enough to recognize what he was looking at. But this was you, Kamari. Don't diminish it. She looked at her father and understood something she hadn't fully understood before, which was that his mistakes had not erased his ability to see her clearly. The debt, the contracts, the position he had put her in, all of it was real, and all of it had caused harm. But he was still her father. And he still knew who she was. Thank you, Pa, she said quietly. The 72 hours moved slowly. She slept in a room with institutional furniture and no windows. She ate food brought by agents who were polite and professional and did not engage in conversation beyond what was necessary. She played cards with her brothers, read briefing documents Agent Vance provided about what to expect during Chen's trial, and thought about Kaine constantly. He texted her once every 12 hours. Short messages. Day 1. You're safe. That's all that matters. Day 2. Chin is scrambling. The net is closing. Tomorrow morning this ends. Day 3. 6 a.m. The arrest happens. By noon you'll be out. I'll be waiting. She read each message multiple times. She wanted to call him. She didn't. The safe house protocols discouraged unnecessary communication, and she understood why. Every call was a potential security risk. But she wanted to hear his voice. She wanted to tell him that she'd been thinking about the kitchen, about the jangjorim he'd promised to make her, about the future that started after this was finished. At 6 a.m. on day 3, her phone buzzed with a news alert. Breaking. Federal agents arrest businessman Marcus Chen in multi-state racketeering operation. She read the article twice. Chen had been arrested at his home in Connecticut attempting to board a private plane. Simultaneous raids at 4 other locations had netted 8 associates and, according to the FBI, enough evidence to ensure significant prison time. At 6:45 a.m., Agent Vance knocked on her door. "It's done," Vance said. "Chen is in custody. You're free to go." Kamari gathered the few things she'd been allowed to bring: her phone, a change of clothes Jean had packed for her. She walked out of the safe house into a cold November morning, and standing next to a black car at the curb, looking like he hadn't slept in 3 days, was Kaine. She stopped walking. He looked at her across the distance of the sidewalk, and she looked back, and for a moment neither of them moved. Then she crossed to him, and he pulled her against him hard enough that she lost her breath, and he buried his face in her hair and just held on. 72 hours, he said against her ear. "I'm okay," she said. "It's over." "I know." He pulled back just enough to look at her face. "But I need you to understand that those were the longest 72 hours of my life, and I am never doing them again." "Kaine, I'm not saying you were wrong. You were right. Completely right. If you hadn't been in protective custody, I would have done something irreversible." He cupped her face in both hands. "But now Chen is in federal custody, and I don't have to choose between who I was and who I'm trying to be, and you are standing in front of me, and I need to say something." "Say it." "Move in with me," he said. She blinked. "What?" "Move in with me. Not because of safety. Not because of Chen or threats or protective custody. Because I want to wake up next to you. Because I want your recipes on my counter and your books on my shelves and your voice in my space when I come home." He paused. "Because the 72 hours you were gone, my penthouse stopped being home and started being the place I was waiting to leave so I could get back to you." Kamari looked at him. At his face, tired and unguarded and completely sincere. "That's a significant thing to ask after 72 hours apart," she said. "I know. And if you need time." "Yes," she said. He stopped. "Yes. Yes, I'll move in with you." She smiled. "But I'm keeping my apartment for 6 months. Just in case you have terrible habits I don't know about yet." He laughed. Actually laughed, the sound surprised out of him, and he kissed her right there on the sidewalk in Queens at 7 in the morning with Agent Vance watching from the safe house door and Jean waiting by the car. It was not careful. It was not controlled. It was the kiss of a man who had spent 3 days not touching the person he loved and was done with the restraint of it. When they separated, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I don't have terrible habits," he said. "Everyone says that. I'm exceptionally organized. That's not a habit, that's a personality trait." "I'll make you the jangjorim tonight," he said. "You can evaluate my kitchen habits in real time." "Deal," she said. He kissed her again, briefer, and then opened the car door for her. Jean drove them back to Manhattan through morning traffic, and Kaine held her hand the entire way, his thumb moving absently across her knuckles like he was confirming she was real. "The board dinner is Friday," he said quietly. "The final piece. Chairman Beck will make the acquisition announcement. Are you ready?" "I've been ready for 3 years," he said. "But yes. Especially now." "Why especially now?" He looked at her. "Because the thing I'm building isn't just the business anymore. It's this. Us. The life that comes after the acquisition closes and the transition is complete, and I'm finally just," he paused. "Just a man who runs a legitimate company and loves a woman who's too intelligent for her own good." "I'm exactly intelligent enough for my own good," she said. "Yes," he said quietly. "You are. That's why I'm keeping you." Friday arrived cold and clear. The board dinner was at Per Se, the kind of restaurant that had no prices on the menu and required reservations months in advance unless you were the kind of person who called and got a table anyway. Kamari wore midnight blue, her own choice, and Kaine had looked at her when she emerged from his bedroom, their bedroom now, her things slowly migrating into the space, and gone very still. "What?" she said. "Nothing," he said. "You're beautiful." "I'm processing." "You've seen me in formal wear before." "Not in my home." "Not emerging from our bedroom." "Not," he stopped. "This is different." "Good different." "Extremely good different," he said, and kissed her carefully so as not to disturb her lipstick, which she appreciated. The dinner was everything Grace's notes would have predicted: formal, significant, Chairman Beck presiding over the table like a man who had made his decision weeks ago and was simply waiting for the appropriate moment to announce it. Kamari sat beside Kaine and spoke when spoken to and mostly watched the dynamics of the room, the careful choreography of powerful people performing civility while calculating constantly. Halfway through the meal, Chairman Beck stood. The table went quiet. "I'm not a man for long speeches," Beck said in Korean accented English. "So I'll be brief. Hanseong Bank has completed its evaluation of Ryu Capital Holdings. We have reviewed the financials, the operational transition, the transparency audit preliminary findings, and the leadership." His eyes moved to Kaine. "The acquisition is approved. Pending final documentation, Ryu Capital will become the controlling partner in our North American expansion, effective January 1st. The table applauded politely. Kaine stood, shook Beck's hand with both of his, and said something in Korean that Kamari didn't understand, but that made Beck smile, the real smile of a man who has heard sincerity. When Kaine sat back down, she leaned close. "What did you say to him?" "I thanked him for trusting what I'm building rather than what I came from." "That's beautiful." "It's true," he said quietly. The dinner continued. Dessert was served. Coffee appeared. And then, just as the evening was approaching its natural conclusion, the restaurant's front door opened and 3 men in FBI jackets walked in, followed by Agent Vance. The table went silent. Vance walked directly to their table. She looked at Kaine, then at Kamari, and then at Chairman Beck. "I apologize for the interruption," she said. "Mr. Ryu, Ms. Mensah, I need to speak with you both. It's urgent." Kamari's stomach dropped. "What happened?" "Marcus Chen escaped federal custody 2 hours ago." The table erupted in whispered conversation. Kaine's expression went absolutely flat. Chairman Beck looked at Vance with the sharp attention of a man reassessing everything he'd just approved. Kaine stood smoothly. "Excuse us," he said to the table, and his voice was so controlled that Kamari understood he was holding something back with every ounce of discipline he possessed. They stepped into the restaurant's private room. Vance closed the door. "How?" Kaine said. One word. Utterly calm. Completely lethal underneath. He had help. "Someone inside our transport operation. We're investigating, but right now our priority is containment." Vance looked at Kamari. "Ms. Mensah, we believe he's coming for you. He has nothing left to lose. His operation is destroyed, his assets frozen. But he can still hurt the people who hurt him." "Where is her family?" Kaine asked. "Already in protective custody. We moved them the moment we realized Chen was gone." "Where is Jean?" Kaine looked at Kamari. "Outside," she said. Kaine pulled out his phone, texted something brief. "Jean is moving the car to the service entrance. We're leaving. Now." "Mr. Ryu," Vance said carefully. "The best option is for Ms. Mensah to come with us. Federal protection." "Failed," Kaine said flatly. "Chen escaped your custody. You're telling me you can protect her better than I can. I'm telling you that if you handle this your way, it ends badly for everyone." Kaine looked at Agent Vance with the particular stillness that Kamari had only seen once before, the night Chen had been in her apartment. "Chen put his hands on her once," Kaine said very quietly. "If he gets close enough to try again, I will ensure it's the last thing he does. Federal protocols have failed. My methods won't." "Kaine," Kamari said. He looked at her. The expression on his face was not the man who had been approved for a multi-billion-dollar acquisition 30 minutes ago. It was someone older, someone harder, someone who had spent years learning how to handle threats and was about to remember exactly how. I need to handle this, he said. Not that way, she said. Kamari. Not that way, she repeated. We're at a dinner with the Hanseong board. Chairman Beck just approved your acquisition. If you walk out of here and handle Chen the way you want to handle him, everything you've built ends tonight. His jaw tightened. I don't care. Yes, you do, she said. You've cared for 3 years. Don't stop now because of me. He's hunting you. Then let's be smarter than him, she said. She turned to Vance. You said he has nothing left to lose. That means he's reckless. Reckless people make mistakes. What's your plan? Vance looked between them. We've got units tracking his known associates, monitoring transport hubs. But Chen knows we're looking. He's going to ground somewhere we haven't mapped yet. No, Kamari said slowly. He's not going to ground. He's going to come after me directly because that's the only victory he has left. Which means we use that. Use it how? Kaine asked. She looked at him. We set a trap. We make me visible. And when he moves on me, you have the FBI waiting. Absolutely not, Kaine said immediately. It's the only play that gets him in custody without you compromising everything, she said. Agent Vance, can your people track his movements if he's following me? If we know where you're going to be and when, yes. We can establish a perimeter, plainclothes surveillance, intercept protocols. Vance looked at Kaine. But she'd be exposed for however long it takes Chen to make his move. That's significant risk. No, Kaine said. Kaine. I said no, Kamari. I'm not using you as bait. You're not using me as anything. I'm volunteering. She held his gaze. This is the only way that ends with Chen in custody, and you still being who you've worked 3 years to become. You know I'm right. He stared at her. She watched him run every calculation, every alternative, every possible outcome. She watched him arrive at the same conclusion she had and hate it completely. If anything happens to you, he started. Nothing will happen. Because you'll be there. And Agent Vance's team will be there. And we will be smarter and faster than a desperate man with nothing left. Vance looked at Kaine. If we do this, I need your word that you let us take him into custody. No handling it your way. Federal arrest. Federal prosecution. Kaine was very quiet. Your word, Mr. Ryu, Vance said. If your people fail, Kaine said, if he gets within arm's reach of her, my word is void. Vance considered that. Fair enough. They planned it in 10 minutes. Kamari would return to Kaine's penthouse, publicly, visibly, in the car with Jean driving. The FBI would establish surveillance on the building and the surrounding blocks. If Chen was tracking her, he would see her go home. He would make his move overnight when he thought she was alone and vulnerable. Except she wouldn't be alone. Kaine would be there. Jean would be there. And the FBI's tactical team would be staged in the building across the street. It was a good plan. Kamari hated every part of it. But she walked back into the dining room with Kaine, and they made polite excuses to Chairman Beck about a family emergency, and they left through the service entrance where Jean was waiting with the car. The drive back to the penthouse was silent. Kaine held her hand so tightly it almost hurt. She didn't tell him to ease up. When they arrived at the building, she got out slowly, visibly, under the entrance lights where anyone watching could see her clearly. She walked into the lobby, took the elevator to the penthouse, and stepped inside the space that had started to feel like home. Jean stationed himself outside the door. Kaine checked every room, every window, every possible entry point with the thoroughness of someone who had done this before and was not leaving anything to chance. When he finished, he came back to the living room where she was standing, and he looked at her for a long moment. I don't like this, he said. I know. If he gets past the FBI. He won't. But if he does, then you'll do what you need to do, she said quietly. And I will understand it. Whatever you need to do to keep us both alive, Kaine. I won't judge it. He crossed to her and pulled her against him, and they stood there in his living room with the city enormous outside the windows and the trap set and the waiting begun. After tonight, he said against her hair, we're going somewhere. Somewhere with no danger and no FBI surveillance and no one trying to kill us. Somewhere I can cook for you and we can sleep past 7 and nothing more dramatic than burnt rice happens. I would like that, she said. Where do you want to go? I don't care, she said honestly. As long as you're there. His arms tightened around her. They didn't sleep. They sat on the couch with the lights low and talked quietly about small things, her brothers, his attempts at cooking, the recipe her mother had written that she still hadn't taught him, the jangjorim he'd finally perfected. They talked because silence felt too heavy and because talking meant they were both still there, still whole, still on the same side of whatever was coming. At 2 a.m., Kaine's phone buzzed. A text from Agent Vance. Movement on the south perimeter. Single individual, matches Chen's build. We're tracking. Stay inside. Kaine showed her the text. She nodded. He stood up, moved to the window, looked down at the street 40 floors below. She knew he couldn't see anything from this height, but he looked anyway, because looking was something to do with the energy that had nowhere else to go. At 2:17 a.m., the building's fire alarm went off. Kaine's head whipped toward the door. That's not a drill. Jin's voice came through the door, sharp and immediate. Kaine. FBI says Chen triggered the alarm. He's in the building. 18th floor, moving up through the stairwell. Kaine looked at Kamari. Bedroom. Now. Lock the door. Don't open it unless you hear my voice. Kaine. Kamari, please. His voice was absolutely steady. I need to know you're behind a locked door. I need that so I can think clearly. She went to the bedroom. She locked the door. She heard Kaine and Jin speaking in low voices outside, heard movement, heard the particular sound of someone checking a weapon. Her phone buzzed. Agent Vance. Chen is on your floor. We're in the stairwell behind him. Intercept in progress. Stay where you are. She texted back, understood. Then she heard the penthouse door explode inward. Not the lock giving, an actual explosion, small and controlled, the kind that removed a door from its frame. She heard shouting, heard Jin's voice raised sharp and lethal, heard Kaine say something in Korean that sounded like a command. Then she heard Chen's voice, too close, inside the penthouse. Where is she, Ryu? You're not getting near her. I don't need to get near her. I just need her to know I could. That I got this close. That your protection means nothing. You're surrounded. FBI is in the stairwell. There's no exit. I don't need an exit. I just need her afraid. Kamari's hands shook. She looked at the bedroom door. She thought about staying behind it, locked and safe, while Kaine handled the threat. She thought about what her mother would do. Her mother would open the door. So she did. She walked out of the bedroom into the penthouse living room, and she saw Chen standing near the entrance with a gun in his hand, and Jin bleeding from his shoulder, but still standing between Chen and Kaine. And Kaine with the expression of a man who was 1 second from doing something irreversible. Kamari, get back in the bedroom, Kaine said without looking at her. No, she said. Chen's eyes moved to her. He smiled. There she is. The woman who destroyed everything. You destroyed everything, she said. I just documented it. Same result. He raised the gun slightly. Not pointing it directly at her, but the threat implicit. I want you to know something before this ends. I want you to know that you could have made this easy. You could have signed the contract, played the role, given me what I needed. But you chose him instead. You chose this. I chose myself, Kamari said. That's what you never understood. I was never choosing between you and him. I was choosing between being afraid and being free. And how's that freedom working out for you right now? Better than your options, she said. Behind Chen, the stairwell door opened silently. Agent Vance and 3 tactical agents moved into position, weapons raised. Marcus Chen, Vance said. Put the weapon down. You're surrounded. There's no exit. Chen's hand tightened on the gun. For 1 second, Kamari thought he was going to raise it, was going to force the ending he wanted. Then Kaine moved. Not toward Chen. Toward Kamari. He stepped between her and the gun with the fluid certainty of someone who had decided that if bullets were being fired, they were going through him first. Kaine, don't, she started. Non-negotiable, he said quietly. Chen looked at them both. At Kaine standing in front of Kamari like a wall. At the FBI agents behind him. At Jin, bleeding but still ready to move. At all his options narrowing to a single point. He lowered the gun. Smart choice, Vance said. The tactical team moved in fast, disarming Chen, securing him, reading him his rights in the flat professional tone of people who did this so often it was reflex. Chen didn't resist. He just looked at Kamari one last time. "You won," he said. "Congratulations." "I survived," she said. "That's not the same thing." They took him away. The moment he was out of the penthouse, Kaine turned to Kamari and pulled her against him so hard she lost her breath. "Don't ever do that again," he said. "Do what?" "Walk out of a locked room when someone has a gun. You were out here. Which is why you should have stayed in there." "No," she said into his chest. "If you're in the room, I'm in the room. That's how this works now." He pulled back just enough to look at her face. His expression was somewhere between furious and terrified and relieved, and something else she didn't have a name for. "You are the most frustrating person I have ever loved," he said. "I know," she said. He kissed her. Hard and desperate and entirely too brief, because Jean made a pained sound behind them and Kaine immediately shifted to paramedic mode, examining Jin's shoulder with competent hands while Jean protested in Korean that he was fine and Kaine responded in the same language with what sounded like extremely detailed disagreement. Agent Vance appeared in the doorway. "Jean needs medical attention. We've got an EMT team downstairs." "I'm fine," Jean said in English. "You're bleeding through your shirt," Kaine said. "You're going to the hospital." Jean looked at Kamari. "Tell him I'm fine." "You're going to the hospital," Kamari said. Jean sighed the sigh of a man outnumbered. 2 hours later, Jean was in the hospital with a through-and-through shoulder wound that was painful but not serious. Chen was in federal custody with charges that would ensure he never walked free. And Kamari was sitting on Kaine's couch wrapped in a blanket that Jean had apparently purchased specifically for shock management, which seemed excessive until she realized she couldn't stop shaking. Kaine sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched, his hand covering hers. "It's over," he said quietly. "I know. Chen is in custody. The acquisition is approved. The transition is complete. I know. We can start the after now." She looked at him. "The after?" "The part where we're just," he paused, seeming to search for the right words. "Just us. No arrangements. No threats. No federal investigations or mafia transitions or anything except two people building something together." "I would like that," she said. "What would you like it to look like?" he asked. She thought about that. "I'd like Sunday dinners. With my family. With you cooking sometimes and me cooking sometimes and Jean invited if his shoulder heals properly." "Done. I'd like to wake up next to you and have that be ordinary. Not special. Just what we do." "Also done. I'd like you to teach me the Jangjoram properly. The real way. So I can make it when you're not there." "I'm going to be there," he said. "I know. But still." He smiled. "Okay. I'll teach you. And I'd like," she stopped. "Tell me." "I'd like to stop being afraid," she said quietly. "I'd like to trust that the hard part is behind us and what comes next is just life. Normal life. The kind where the most dramatic thing that happens is burning rice." He was quiet for a moment. Then he shifted, turning toward her fully, taking both her hands. "Kamari," he said. "I cannot promise you that nothing difficult will ever happen again. I have enemies who are in prison but still have reach. I have a past that will follow me regardless of how much I've changed. And you have built a career on exposing people who don't want to be exposed, which means you will make enemies too." "That's not reassuring," she said. "I'm not trying to reassure you. I'm trying to tell you the truth." He squeezed her hands. "But what I can promise is that whatever comes, you will not face it alone. I will be beside you. And we will handle it the way we've handled everything else, intelligently, carefully, and with the absolute certainty that we are better together than we ever were separately." She looked at him for a long moment. At the man who had terrified a room by standing in it. Who had broken down her door because she texted one word. Who had stood between her and a gun without hesitation. Who was sitting here now, in the aftermath of everything, promising not that life would be easy, but that he would be there. "Okay," she said. Okay, let's start the after." He pulled her close, and she let him, and they sat on his couch wrapped in Jin's shock management blanket while the city outside continued its enormous indifferent work, and for the first time in months, nothing was waiting in the dark. 1 month later, her entire family came to dinner at the penthouse. Her father arrived first, punctual in the way he'd always been about the things that mattered. Tund came with his girlfriend, who Kamari liked immediately because she argued with Tund about basketball with the same intensity Tund argued with everyone about everything. Dami flew up from Atlanta with their grandmother's old cookbook, which made Kamari cry in the kitchen before she could stop herself. Khalad showed up late with apologies and wine and the energy of someone who still couldn't quite believe his sister was living in a Manhattan penthouse with a man who had once run a criminal organization. Gene was there too, his shoulder healed, serving as sous chef to Kaine, who was making the jangjoram with Kamari watching from the counter, offering absolutely no help except encouragement and commentary. "You're burning the bottom," she said. "It's supposed to burn slightly," Kaine said. "Slightly. That's not slightly. How would you know? You've never made this." "I made it 3 days ago when you were in meetings." He looked at her. "You made it?" "I used the recipe you wrote down. The one you said you weren't writing down." "Did it work?" "It was perfect," she said. Something in his face did the thing it did, the unguarded shift that was only hers. "Show off," he said. "I learned from the best," she said. Her father appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Is there anything I can help with?" "Set the table," Kamari said. "The dishes are in the cabinet on the left. The Nigerian ones." Her father smiled. "Your mother's." "Mine now," she said. "But hers first." They sat down to dinner at 7:30. The table was too crowded, the conversation too loud. Someone was arguing about whether Khalad's new apartment was actually a good deal or just a good deal for Manhattan, which were categorically different things. And Tund's girlfriend was telling a story about her job that had everyone laughing, and Jean was explaining to Dami the proper technique for restaurant-quality jangjoram. And her father was watching all of it with the particular expression of a man who had nearly lost this and knew it. Kaine sat at the head of the table, and Kamari watched him navigate her family with the same careful precision he brought to everything, answering Khalad's questions about finance, listening to Tund's girlfriend's story with genuine attention, refilling her father's glass without being asked. At one point he caught her looking at him. He raised an eyebrow slightly. She smiled. After dinner, after the dishes were cleared and the coffee was served and the conversation had settled into the comfortable rhythm of people who had nowhere else to be, her father stood. "I want to say something," he said. The table quieted. "Kamari," her father said, looking directly at her. "I put you in an impossible position. I signed contracts in your name, I borrowed money I couldn't repay, and I forced you to find a way out of a situation I created. What you did, walking across that ballroom, building the case against Chen, protecting this family while building a life with Kaine, all of that was yours. Your courage. Your intelligence. Your refusal to be smaller than you are." He paused. "Your mother would have been so proud. And I am proud. And I am sorry it took me this long to say it properly." The table was very quiet. Kamari looked at her father across the table, this man who had made terrible choices and was spending the rest of his life trying to make better ones, and she thought about what her mother used to say, "Grace is not about deserving it, baby. It's about choosing it anyway." "Thank you, Pa," she said quietly. They stayed until midnight. When everyone finally left, the penthouse felt larger and quieter and deeply, perfectly peaceful. Kamari stood at the window looking at Manhattan doing its thing below. Kaine came up behind her, sliding his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Your family is extraordinary," he said. "They're loud." "That too." She felt him smile against her temple. "But they're extraordinary. And they love you in the loud way." "I like that." "What way do you love me?" she asked. He was quiet for a moment. "The quiet way. The way that doesn't announce itself but is always there. Like the bottom of the rice." She turned in his arms to look at him. "Did you just compare your love for me to burnt rice?" "To the best part of the rice," he said seriously. "There's a difference." She laughed. She laughed the way she had learned to laugh in the past months, freely, without auditing it, without managing what came after. She laughed, and he watched her with the expression that was only hers, and when she stopped laughing he kissed her, slow and certain and entirely without urgency. "Kamari," he said against her mouth. "Yes." "I'm happy," he said. I wasn't sure I would know what it felt like. But this is it. This is happy. Yes, she said. This is happy. They went to bed sometime after 1, wrapped around each other in the dark, and outside the city continued without them, and inside the penthouse that had started as a space and become theirs. 2 people who had found each other through a lie slept like people who had nothing left to run from. 3 months after that, Kamari came home from work to find Kaine in the kitchen making jangjorim without her, which he never did, and looking nervous in a way she had never seen him look nervous. "What's wrong?" she said immediately. "Nothing's wrong. You look nervous." "I'm not nervous." "Kaine, you're the most controlled person I know, and you just put salt in the jangjorim twice. What's happening?" He set down the salt. He turned to face her fully. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he pulled a small box from his pocket. Kamari stopped breathing. "I had a plan for this," he said. "I was going to take you to the restaurant where we had our first real dinner. I was going to wait until dessert. I was going to say something perfect and rehearsed, and you were going to cry, and it was going to be a moment worth remembering. But," she said, "but then I was making jangjorim, and you came home, and you looked at me the way you look at me, and I realized I don't want the perfect moment. I just want this one." He opened the box. Inside was a ring. Simple, beautiful, exactly right. "Kamari Mensah," he said. "You walked into my life with a lie that became the most honest thing that ever happened to me. You stood beside me when I didn't know how to ask for someone to stand there. You chose protective custody, so I wouldn't compromise who I was trying to be. You walked out of a locked room when I told you not to because you wouldn't let me face danger without you." He paused. "I am a better man because you saw who I could be and refused to accept anything less. And I would very much like to spend the rest of my life being that man. With you. If you'll have me." She looked at the ring. She looked at his face. She looked at the kitchen where he was burning jangjorim because he was too nervous to cook properly, and she thought about walking across a ballroom with shaking hands and his hand, warm, when she took it, and everything that had happened between that moment and this one. "Yes," she said. "Yes. Yes, I'll marry you. Obviously, I'll marry you." He slid the ring onto her finger with hands that shook slightly, which was the first time she'd ever felt him shake, and then he pulled her against him and held on like he was confirming something. "I love you," he said into her hair. "I love you too," she said. "But Kaine." "Yes. The jangjorim is definitely burning." "I don't care," he said. "It's going to smoke." "Still don't care." She pulled back just enough to look at him. "We should turn off the stove before the fire alarm goes off. Or," he said, "we could let it burn and order takeout and go to bed early and celebrate properly." "That is terrible resource management." "I know," he said. "I'm making bad decisions because I'm engaged and I'm happy and nothing else matters right now." She reached past him and turned off the stove. Then she took his hand and led him to the bedroom. Behind them, the jangjorim cooled on the stove, the bottom properly burnt, the apartment filling with the smell of it, and outside Manhattan continued its eternal work. And inside the penthouse, 2 people who had found each other through impossible circumstances celebrated the beginning of something considerably less impossible. Something ordinary and extraordinary at once. Something like love. 6 months later, they were married in a small ceremony in Brooklyn, in the same church her mother had been married in, with her family in the front row and Gene as best man and Chairman Beck attending as an honored guest, which made the small ceremony slightly less small but considerably more significant. Kamari wore white. Kaine wore traditional Korean formal wear at her request because she wanted to see him in it, and he had looked at her like she had asked for the moon but had agreed anyway. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, Tun stage whispered, "Still time to run," and their father shushed him, and everyone laughed, and Kamari looked at Kaine and thought about everything it had taken to get here. The ballroom. The gold dress. The arrangement that became something real. Chen and the task force and protective custody, and the night he'd stood between her and a gun. The jangjorim and the agusi soup and her mother's dishes on his table. The ring in the kitchen and the burnt rice and the quiet way he loved her that was always there. "I do," she said, when it was her turn. "I do," he said, when it was his. They kissed in front of everyone, and it was not careful or controlled or performed for an audience. It was the kiss of two people who had earned this moment by surviving everything before it. At the reception, her father gave a toast that made her cry. Tund gave a toast that made everyone laugh. Jean gave a brief toast in Korean that Kaine translated as "they're perfect for each other" and "also very annoying," which is also perfect. Chairman Beck approached them during dinner. "Congratulations," he said to Kaine. "You have built something extraordinary. The business, yes. But this," he gestured to the reception, to her family, to the whole beautiful mess of it. "This is the better achievement." "I know," Kaine said quietly, looking at Kamari. They danced. Not well. Kaine was a terrible dancer and Kamari was only slightly better, but they danced anyway, in the middle of everyone, and she rested her head on his shoulder, and he held her like she was the only thing in the room that mattered. "Happy?" he asked. "Extremely," she said. "Me too," he said. "Every day. Still getting used to it." "You'll get there," she said. "We'll get there," he corrected. "Yes," she said. "We will." And they did. Not all at once. Not without difficulty. There were hard days and complicated decisions and moments when the past tried to assert itself and had to be actively chosen against. There were arguments and misunderstandings and the normal friction of two people learning to build a life together. But there were also Sunday dinners that became a tradition. There was the jangjoram he taught her properly, and the egusi soup she taught him properly, and the kitchen where they cooked together more often than separately. There were mornings waking up beside each other that stopped being remarkable and became ordinary, which was its own kind of remarkable. There were board meetings and acquisitions and Ryu Capital becoming exactly what Kaine had spent years building toward: legitimate, successful, respected. There was the day Kamari was offered a position leading financial oversight for a major nonprofit foundation, and Kaine opened champagne at 11 in the morning because some celebrations couldn't wait for evening. There was the night Jean announced he was getting married and they threw him an engagement party that lasted until 3 a.m. and involved entirely too much soju. There was the afternoon her father called to say he'd made his final debt payment to Ryu Capital, and the way Kaine had quietly and without announcement transferred the deed to her father's small business back to him, and the way her father had wept on the phone. There was the morning Kamari woke up feeling sick and took a test and stared at it for 5 full minutes before walking into the kitchen where Kaine was making coffee and simply handing it to him without words. The way he looked at it. The way he looked at her. The way he set down the test very carefully and pulled her against him and said, voice absolutely wrecked, "We're having a baby." "Yes," she said. "I'm going to be a father." "Yes." "I don't know how to be a father," he said. "You'll learn," she said. "We'll learn together." And they did. 7 months later, on a Tuesday morning in March, Kamari gave birth to a daughter with her mother's eyes and Kaine's serious expression and lungs that announced she had opinions about being born and intended to share them. They named her Grace, after the woman who had made a terrible mistake and spent years earning forgiveness, because Kaine said everyone deserved a name that meant redemption. Her middle name was Adunni. Yoruba. It meant sweet one. Kamari's mother's name. Grace Adunni-Ryu came home to the penthouse that had stopped being his space and become theirs and was now, officially, home to 3 people instead of 2. Kamari stood in the nursery they had built together, holding her daughter, watching Kaine watch both of them with the expression of a man who has received something he didn't know he was allowed to want. "We made a person," he said quietly. "We did. She's perfect. She's 1 day old, and she's already ruled this apartment with absolute authority," Kamari said. "She's definitely yours." He smiled. Crossed to them. Put his arms around both of them. "I used to think," he said quietly, "that the best thing I would ever build was Ryu Capital. The legitimacy. The transition. The proof that I could be different than what I came from. And now? Now I know the best thing I ever built was this," he said. "You. Her. Us. This family. Everything else was just practice." Kamari looked at him. This man who had terrified rooms by standing in them. Who had stood between her and a gun. Who was currently holding their daughter like she was made of glass and might break if he breathed wrong. "You're going to be an amazing father," she said. "I'm going to try," he said. "The trying is the point," she said. "Isn't it?" "Yes," he said, looking at their daughter. "The trying is exactly the point." Outside, March in New York was doing what it always did, unpredictable, half winter and half spring, the city moving through its enormous rhythms without any awareness of the small perfect moment happening 40 floors above it. Inside the penthouse, Kamari stood with her husband and her daughter, and she thought about walking across a ballroom with a lie and a prayer, and she thought about his hand, warm, when she took it. And she thought about every impossible thing that had happened between that moment and this one. And she understood, with the clarity that only came from surviving everything required to get here, that the best love stories were not the ones that started perfectly. They were the ones that started impossibly and became perfect anyway. Through choice, through effort, through the willingness to keep trying even when trying was hard, through burnt rice and jangjorim and agusi soup, through Sunday dinners and terrible dancing and protective custody and standing between each other and danger. Through all of it, this was the after. And it was everything. That's the end of this story. The whole story. From the ballroom to the baby. From the lie to the love. From the terrifying Mafia CEO to the man making jangjorim in his kitchen while his daughter sleeps. If this story lived in your chest the way I hope it did, if you felt every moment from the fear to the proposal to the family they built, smash that like button right now. Subscribe and turn on every notification because we make stories here that stay with you long after they end. Comment below and tell me your favorite moment. The door exploding? The proposal in the kitchen? The burnt jangjorim? Grace Adunni being born? Chen's arrest? The wedding? I want to know what got you. Share this with someone who believes that love worth having is love that costs something real and builds something lasting. Thank you for being here for every second of Kamari and Kaine's story. From the gala to the hospital to the family they built together. Take care of each other. I'll see you in the next story.